Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from beautiful Tuscany, Italy. This is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Italy. And welcome to Villa Vrindavan. I'm here live. If you can see them, say hi to them. This is all the crew here. A bunch of them just got back from swimming in a pond. They're just living the life here. Eating vegan gelato, causing trouble, the usual. And Kaustubha's in the other room there. Kaustubha, good morning.
Good morning, Raghunath.
And Mara, good to see you. We miss you.
Wish I was there with you guys.
We wish you were here. Kinderhook Devi, the goddess of Kinderhook. How are you, Mara?
I'm well, thanks.
Okay. Well, this is a special day today because it is our Param Gurus, our Guru's Guru. You know, when we do the show, oftentimes we don't talk about Srila Prabhupada so much because I like because so different, many types of yoga people come to this podcast, and they're not necessarily affiliated with any particular yoga tradition. But Kaustubha and myself, in our tradition, it comes from Srila Prabhupada, who basically taught the teachings of Bhakti in the West. Of course, Bhakti is eternal. There's so many different lineages of Bhakti. But Prabhupada, we were saying in this morning's class, Prabhupada had this special desire to serve his guru, who instructed him at a young age. If you ever get resources and time, go to the West and translate books. Translate this sort of like mysterious canon of literature that was basically unapproachable to the to Westerners before he came in, did a straight up translation, and not just like a translation like an academic, a translator like a devotee. And it's different because we know that if you're devoted to something, you get a different insight about that thing. For example, if I just wanted to study punk rock and hardcore and I knew nothing about it and I just drove by CBGB's and saw all these people dressed crazy, and then I walked in with a film crew and got took photos and video of people stage diving, it looks quite crazy. But if you're sort of on the inside, you know the inner workings of it. Maybe not so crazy.
Crazier.
Yeah, it's even maybe crazier. So anything when you study it from the outside is interesting, but it's still the outside. And Krishna consciousness is different. Bhakti, spiritual life, is different. You can't just study it from the outside, or it just seems interesting at best, peculiar, maybe a weird,
quaint,
culty
maybe
at worst. Quaint, right? Mm-hmm. And they actually have an analogy in Vedic teachings. They say it's like understanding honey by studying the honey jar, right? Because if you look at honey, it's weird. It's sort of clear but gooey, and it drips. It's not liquid, but it's not a solid. And you can't really understand. And if you smell honey, it doesn't like smell like anything particular. But when you take off the cap and dip your little paw in there and lick your fingers, that's how I eat honey. Then it's a whole different experience. Bhakti is the same way. You can only know Bhakti by Bhakti. You can only know devotion through devotion. And then all of a sudden, Krishna starts to reveal himself. And the same is with the when we study these teachings of our guru's guru, we find that it's because he was devoted to it that it all makes sense. It's not just like, oh, that's very interesting. This is what they study in India as their spiritual scriptures. You actually get entrance into it. And now I can even say for my kids, like if we go to like, what is it? The Metropolitan Museum of Art or something that has Southeast Asian room. Is that it?
It's got an Indian room. Yeah, I mean, it's got that Asian wing to it. And it's got an India kind of room.
I guess every museum probably has an Asian wing, but it's different than saying like, oh, this is a suit of armor and this is the Mona Lisa. It's like, oh my God. Even my kids are like, oh my God, look at that beautiful deity of Vishnu. Oh my God, look at that incredible Shiva lingam. Oh my God, it means something different. The guru has given access in to a place that was only sort of behind glass, and give us access in. And that's like the great fortune of the mercy of Guru, who's allowing us into a place that's sort of sealed off, from academics, even if you're studying it academically. So this is Prabhupada's birthday today. It's a huge holiday, the birthday of the Guru, the birthday of the Acharya, the birthday of the Master.
So we'll be talking about him today.
Yeah, it's a show dedicated to him because it's a special day for us.
Part of the special day is that we fast. Not everybody here has been fasting, but you fast for half a day. Right.
You know what? I was like, yeah, I'm going to fast. I usually fast half a day anyway. But today, Bhakti Justin picked all those fresh figs. And I was like, oh man, figs. And then I was like, do you want to? And I started like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out and give figs to everybody. So some people, whoever's in front of me, I started giving figs out. And then I said, and then Kaustubha walked in. Hey, I said, you want a fig? And he goes, I'm fasting. And I was like,
I didn't do it like that. I did not do it like that.
But, you got me.
But so you fast half a day, but then at 12 o'clock the show starts, right? Like in Italy right now it's 12 o'clock. So I should be breaking the fast right now, but the show's starting. So I thought I'd bring a little something. I have something right here, Raghunath.
Wait a second.
Did
you steal that maha from me?
I stole this maha from you. You were I couldn't believe you fell for it. You got this beautiful sandesh made from, sandesh is one of the nicest sweets, made from the loving cow.
I was just looking for that.
I know. Well, what I did was we're sitting at the table together and I said, what kind of trees are those? And then you kicked in like all Mr. Knowledgeable, like those are cypress trees and this and that.
Got me with the old what kind of trees are that trick.
Yeah, so I'm going to break fast right now. Here we go. Delicious.
Because here's the deal about Mahaprasad. It's
you
like special sweets. They're cooked with incredible love. And then they're offered with incredible love. And isn't it the famous story about your guru who Prabhupada actually gave him a sweet ball? And even took a bite out of it, which makes it like special maha. And someone snuck up behind your guru and took it off of his plate and just immediately put it in their mouth. Mm-hmm. And your guru got up and said, Prabhupada, did you see what he did?
My guru's probably choking him.
And your guru got up really upset and said, Prabhupada, did you see what he did? And Prabhupada said, yes, he's very smart. That's right. So there's also a little game where maha you're allowed to be incredibly eager and like almost like criminal about it. So today, somebody gave me some sweets today, some maha sweets, and they also gave me some flowers and some tulsi to offer to my deities. And so I'm walking around with these sweets, and Kaustubha's like, oh, you got some flowers. Can I use them for my puja, for my worship? And I said, yeah, I'll give you some. And he goes, oh, great. And you got some sweets to offer? I said, no, these are. Oh no. No. He said, is that prasad? He said, he saw the sweets. He said, is that prasad? I said, no. They're boga. Because he took them out of my hand. He goes, this is prasad. And I said, no, it's boga. I have to offer them. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And he gave it back. And I go, just kidding. They're prasad.
But who had the last laugh, Raghu?
He got the last laugh. And he got me with my ego. Isn't it funny? He starts saying, Raghunath, I'm confused. What are all these trees? And then I put on my arborist hat and I was like, well, that tree over there is a magnolia.
I'll save you a little bit, though.
You can't possibly eat all those sweets on your own.
Well, I could easily. Okay, so we're going to read today about Srila Prabhupada, right? By the way, it was a beautiful festival here yesterday.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was really nice. It was really
Janmashtami?
great. It was really great.
Couldn't be more scenic. Here,
Unless we
some
want
of
to
the lovely people.
downplay it for Mara, who's not here. Oh, Mara was
No,
horrible. It
okay.
started
It
pouring
wasn't that good.
rain. There was a whole bunch of
There's a riot broke out.
a riot break. I broke up a bunch of those. What are those flying things that take over cornfields? Not
Flying
maggots.
things
Like
that take over
locusts?
Locusts. A bunch of
Locusts.
locusts came and ruined the whole piece. Yeah, you wouldn't have liked it, Mara. Cover up for camera. It was great. It was really wonderful because the locals had a big festival. We had our own festival. It was quite nice. And today we're going into
Beautiful people here.
Florence. Beautiful people, wonderful people.
Beautiful people.
All right, so what do you got? You got some nectarian nectar?
Do we have any announcements to make? We're not on tomorrow. We should put that out there, right? No show tomorrow.
We're going
be
on a
back.
bicycle tour around Tuscany.
Hello, Tuscany bicycle tour. So no show tomorrow, but we'll be back on Thursday at 6 a.m. Eastern time. What?
Okay.
Why are you laughing?
I'm just laughing, imagining all these people riding around on a bicycle right
You're
now.
gonna see it. You're gonna see it.
We're gonna- we'll take photos.
And so what I got lined up today is, you know, at one time I was working on the Bhakti Center's website, and I kind of compiled, I kind of wrote it, but I was really like picking from other bios of Srila Prabhupada, and I kind of pieced it together and sewed it together. So this is I thought we'd read from this kind of bio of Srila Prabhupada. I know it's about 8 paragraphs or so, something like that. And then we can comment on it as we go through it. And we can also read some of the appreciations from Allen Ginsberg, from George Harrison, from Thomas Merton, and some other important scholars. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
So if you're unfamiliar with Srila Prabhupada, you'll be a lot more familiar with him after we read. Of course, we're reading his commentaries and his translations every day. But
This
is
gives you a
about
little
his life.
peer into
His life.
into his mind and his life and his offering. You can't
Really-
help but like appreciate and fall in love.
We can't really do it justice when you really understand what he risked to come to the West as an old man with no money and not knowing how here.
It's
teach
quite
Bhakti.
amazing.
It wasn't
He
like
came on
there
a-
were wealthy
he came on
people
a boat.
sponsoring him. And, yeah, he came on
He came in a boat. You know what it would take to get me on
cargo boat.
a cargo ship? You know what it would take to get me on a ship to go to India? Have to like hold a shotgun.
Okay. So let's start reading. As soon as I let me just wash down
Have
this
to
delicious
Wash
sweet.
down that digest that sweet. By the way, Samantha says that the Philly Art Museum has a full temple inside of it. That's pretty amazing.
It's amazing, but it's a little sad because it means
Yeah,
they
it's a
stole
little
it from
sad. They
India.
got it from somewhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
temple, and we took it apart and we brought it back.
Yeah.
Now it's in the museum.
Okay, you ready?
Okay.
His Divine Grace
Yeah.
A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who lived from 1896 till 1977, is widely regarded as the world's preeminent exponent of the teachings and practices of Bhakti-yoga to the Western world.
You wrote this?
Yeah. Sound good
Okay.
so far?
Sound great.
Born Abhay Charan Day on September 1st, 1896.
So
And
that's
it's not
his
September
name,
1st. Yeah. That was
Abhay-
his name at birth. Abhay
His last name is
Charan
Day. D-E. Abhay Charan Day. Okay.
Yeah. And so that it says September 1st. We're honoring that day on the lunar calendar, which doesn't always line up exactly. So he's born on September 1st according to the solar calendar in 1896 in Calcutta. As a youth, he became involved with Mahatma Gandhi's civil disobedience movement. So that's about the 1920s, like around 1920, 21, 22, like that time. It was, however, a meeting with a prominent scholar and spiritual leader, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, which proved most influential on young Abhay's future calling. Upon their first meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who represented an ancient tradition of bhakti, asked Abhay to bring the teachings of Krishna to the English-speaking world. He actually did that the moment he met him, right?
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That the guru comes right up to you. You're like 22 years old and just gives you an instruction like that. And he's not like an ordinary guru. He's not like, he's like a full-on master, a lifelong brahmachari from a family, a spiritual family. His father was a guru. And
incredibly important figure
yeah,
in the history of bhakti.
and he himself, Prabhupada's guru, had thousands of disciples, some of the biggest people in India.
And so it was, Srila Prabhupada was in college at that time. I think he was 22 years old. And he had a friend who's like, I wanted to take you to meet this sadhu. And Prabhupada was like, I've met so many sadhus, it's like,
Right.
you meet so many and they're not like so impressive necessarily. And so he wasn't so eager to go. And he said, no, please come with me. I must take you. So he convinced him. And then he brought up on the roof of this building in India, which you can visit today. And the two of them bowed down to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And as they were rising, he immediately said to them, you two are young, well-educated, young men. You should take the teachings of Sri Chaitanya, the teachings of Bhakti, to the Western world, the English-speaking world. And so that was something that that was an instruction that was given to him as a 22-year-old at the instant of his first meeting with his guru. It was something that was reinforced in the coming years by his guru, who passed away, I believe, in 33. But it wasn't something that he carried out until he got on a ship in 65. He got on a cargo boat in 1965, so many years later, right? As an elderly man, as a 69, 70-year-old. And he
Didn't know where he was going, really. He didn't have any money.
Didn't have any money? Well, okay, so we'll get to that.
Okay.
It's coming up. So upon their first meeting, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, who represented an ancient tradition of bhakti, asked Abai to bring the teachings of Krishna to the English-speaking world. From birth, Abai had been raised in a family devoted to Krishna, the name meaning the all-attractive, all-loving Lord. Deeply moved by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's devotion and wisdom, Abai became his disciple and dedicated himself to carrying out his mentor's requests. But it wasn't until 1965, at the age of 70, that he would set off on his mission to the West. Having since been awarded the honorary title Bhaktivedanta in recognition of his learning and devotion, and having taken vows of sannyas, renunciation, Abai Charan, now known as Bhaktivedanta Swami, begged free passage and boarded a cargo ship to New York. All right, so he got on the ship in Calcutta. It wasn't even like a passenger ship; it was a cargo ship. He got on in Calcutta, went down, to the bottom of India, came up the other side, and then went the whole way. I guess you go through, that passage through, between Africa and Europe, and you go through the Mediterranean Sea, and then Suez Canal and all of that, and then you come out into the Atlantic, and then he crossed that way. The journey proved to be treacherous, and as the elderly spiritual teacher suffered 2 heart attacks aboard the ship. Right? It's like rough waters, and he's an old man, and he had 2 heart attacks. Brutal, right? After 35 days at sea, he finally arrived at a lonely Brooklyn pier with just $7 in Indian rupees. So he had no money, and a crate of his translations of Sanskrit texts.
And no money and a crate of books.
Yeah, a crate of Bhagavatams. First canto of Bhagavatam. That's what we read. That's what he had. In New York, he faced great hardships without money or a place to live. He began his mission humbly by giving classes on the Bhagavad Gita in lofts on the Bowery, New York's infamous Skid Row, and leading kirtan in Tompkins Square Park. So you and I remember the Bowery, what it was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, it didn't get much better from the 80s, from the 60s. It was like if you were to drive your car there. I remember driving with my family when I was a child. You would get surrounded by homeless people, just like banging on the window. It was considered, there was just homeless shelters everywhere.
I haven't seen anywhere else in the world nowadays. It was like,
well, nowadays it's all over California, but
not like that. It was like all like World War II veterans that were alcoholics and missing limbs and just passed out all over the streets. I mean, it was a real scene, and that's where Srila Prabhupada began. Like, right, it was a dangerous place, very dangerous.
It was right where CBGB's is.
Yeah, of course. He was down there.
And so the park there also, which was also like a legendary in the hardcore scene, this Tompkins Square Park, was also like this still very decrepit park. It was filled with drug addicts. When we were young, there was all drug addicts in that park. And that's where he went, and he sort of started chanting. He would sit under this tree and just chant.
And we'll read Allen Ginsberg Appreciation, but he speaks about this, how the other spiritual teachers that had come from India in the 60s, or even some a little bit before that and some a little bit after, they were generally like kind of sponsored by wealthy people, and they were cared for with luxury and all that. Srila Prabhupada was on a mission all alone, with nothing but a few books. And he was down like in the tough sides of New York, and reaching
Even
the
in the
younger people.
even in the turn of the century, it was a very wealthy elite thing to bring swamis to start to teach in New York City. It was a thing. It was a thing
like a
among the
fashion
upper
thing,
echelons of New York City. And anyway, yeah. So, but Prabhupada didn't have that. He didn't have any sponsors. He was just sort of on a mission from God or a mission from his guru.
Yeah. Okay. So after months of hardship and struggle, in July of 1966, Bhaktivedanta Swami established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness for the purpose of checking the imbalance of values in the world and working for real unity and peace. Those are his own words in the original write-up that he had.
And by the way, I'm going to...
incorporation of it. Yeah.
Me and Kaustubha are going to jump into this read with our own personal stories. So I'm going to jump in right here.
Okay. Jump?
Nayana Baram.
Nayana Baram, yeah.
Nayana Baram. So Nayana Baram was this, the very early people that met Prabhupada. They also have so many great stories. And because me and Kaustubha are from New York, we got a chance to meet a lot of these very early people. And also maybe because we travel a lot, I'm not sure, maybe it's just good luck or good fortune, but we had a good fortune of meeting some of the very early disciples before it was even big. So Nayana Baram told me this story once. And Nayana Baram was one who got a boy George into Krishna consciousness. But he told me that he was with Prabhupada when Prabhupada said, yeah, we're going to start this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And that's the name we're going to go by. And Nayana Baram said, everybody laughed at Prabhupada. Like, what are you talking about? We have one tiny little storefront. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Like, are you kidding me? And we were saying that in class this morning. It's the power of one person with a vision that those who don't have that vision will mock it. And it's quite amazing. And they were like, okay, if that's what you want, we'll make a sign that says the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
He had this faith that within the instruction of his guru comes the ability to carry it out if you're just fully dedicated to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, what's the famous taxi cab story? You want to tell that?
I was thinking of I don't believe taxi cab. I think it was sitting in Central Park, if we're thinking of the same story, where he met a stranger. They sat down on the bench together, and they were talking. And he said, "Well, tell me about what you do." He says, "Well, I teach the bhakti and so on. I have temples all around the world." And so, is that what you're talking about? That one?
Yeah.
And the person says, "Well, where are they?" And he says, "Well, they don't exist yet, but it's just time separating,
Just time is separating them. What a great way to look at life. Just time is separate. It's just so much intense focus. And it took that type of focus to establish what he established within the short life. And it was also predicted from his birth, from the astrologer at birth, that he'd open up 108 temples.
That's right. That's right.
Back to astrology. Thank you.
Taking it back. Okay, so after months of hardship and struggle, in July of 1966, Bhaktivedanta Swami established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness for the purpose of checking the imbalance of values in the world. We need some of that, right?
I like
that. And working for real unity and peace. He taught that each soul is part and parcel of the quality of God, and that one could find true happiness through living a simpler, more natural way of life, and dedicating one's energy in the service of God and all living beings. Okay, and that's the summary of, a simple summary of his teachings. Having begun initiating his American followers into the Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage, this lineage of Bhakti Yoga that goes way, way back, Bhaktivedanta Swami next traveled to San Francisco. Amidst the emerging hippie community in the Haight-Ashbury district during 1967's Summer of Love, he taught that the experience of devotion through kirtan was a spiritual high, superior to any pleasures derived from material sources, such as wealth, fame, or intoxication.
So
And the
Kaustubha and myself, and if you've listened to the show and you can back listen to this episode, we have Shama Sundar on the show, and he was one of ones who pioneered the entire San Francisco experience. He not only in a spiritual way, his roommate was the one responsible for managing the Grateful Dead and the whole Haight-Ashbury explosion. And so when Michael, who later became Mukunda Goswami, who met Prabhupada and went to visit his friend Sam, who became Shama Sundar, he said, "You got to meet the Swami." And they said, "Yeah, okay, we'll set up something for him. We'll set him up a program here." And they set up a program where he was playing with the Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, maybe?
Janis Joplin, the Moby Grape.
The Moby Grape. Never heard them, truthfully. I've never heard the Moby Grape, but
heavy blues kind of thing.
So anyway, and then the Swami was headlining at the Avalon Ballroom. So this was a massive bump.
You really kicked it off right.
It was sort of like when I got on Joe Rogan for Wisdom of the Sages. Getting on the bill with the Grateful Dead was the bump. Prabhupada entrance into the San Francisco hippie movement.
That's right.
And Shama Sundar, and what's the name of Shama Sundar's books?
Chasing Rhinos with the Swami.
Chasing Rhinos, great reads. Great
Volumes 1,
reads.
2, and 3.
Yeah, incredible. And listen to that back episode if you want to hear him.
It's good stuff. Amidst the emerging hippie community in the Haight-Ashbury district during 1967's Summer of Love, he taught that the experience of devotion through kirtan was a spiritual high, etc. In the following months, many more came forward to assist him. Desiring to address him with the respect due a revered spiritual teacher, his disciples began to call him Srila Prabhupada, meaning one at whose feet the masters sit. Okay,
See, it's one of these things like Prabhupada is very personal. He's teaching them how to cook. He's teaching them how to clean. He's teaching them how to put on tilak. He's teaching them all the very basics. So in one sense, they have a very friendly relationship with him. And then at a certain point, they started realizing we're taking this guy for granted. Yeah. And things started to shift. It's when you talk to these early disciples, you get a whole, and it's understandable because there's not that many devotees around. He was very intimate with those early disciples, and they have such great stories about Prabhupada.
They do. Okay. In the 11 years that followed, so now we're going from 67 until, now it's really only 10 years that follow that, right? Until 77 when he passed away. So in the 11 years or 10 years that followed, Srila Prabhupada circled the globe 14 times, bringing the teachings of bhakti to thousands of people in 6 continents. Men and women from all backgrounds came forward to accept his message. With their help, Srila Prabhupada established centers and projects throughout the world, including temples, rural farm communities, educational institutions, and what would become the world's largest vegetarian food relief program. Right? We did all this just in that 10 years.
10 years.
With a desire to nourish the roots of Krishna Bhakti in its home, Srila Prabhupada returned to India several times, where he sparked a revival in the Bhakti tradition and opened dozens of temples, including important centers in the holy towns of Vrindavan and Mayapur. Did you hear all that? Okay.
You cut out a little bit, but for the most part, I got it.
I'll read the last sentence. In India, he opened dozens of temples, including important centers in the holy towns of Vrindavan and Mayapur. Perhaps Srila Prabhupada's most significant contribution is his books. He authored 70 volumes on Bhakti-yoga, over 70 volumes on Bhakti-yoga, which are highly respected for their authority, depth, clarity, and fidelity to tradition. His writings have been translated into 76 languages. There's probably much more now. His most prominent works include Bhagavad Gita as it is, the 30-volume Srimad Bhagavatam, which we read here every day on Wisdom of the Sages, and the 17-volume Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. For millennia, the teachings of Bhakti-yoga had been concealed within Sanskrit and Indian vernacular languages. And
Shelter song. Shelter song. Concealed, revealed. Revolution, the solution without bloodshed, finally.
Concealed, okay. So for millennia, the teachings of Bhakti-yoga had been concealed within Sanskrit and Indian vernacular languages, and the rich culture of bhakti had been hidden behind the borders of India. Today, millions around the globe express their gratitude to Srila Prabhupada for revealing the timeless wisdom of bhakti to a world immersed in a materialistic and self-destructive ethos. Yeah.
You know, it's attractive. Americanism is attractive. And Indians, Prabhupada saw that Indians were facing west. We want to go west. We want to send our kids to school in the west. We want that material opulence that the west has. We want to take all this education. We're very educated. We're going to send our kids to Toronto, to New York, etc. And Prabhupada had that insight, like, it doesn't matter what you have. Unless you're spiritually connected, you have nothing. And with that firm faith in that, and we see it, and it came true. We see people who are born in these dharmic families, and they sometimes send their kids to the West for material security, for material education, etc. But they get swept away in the current, and they lose part of their culture. And you talk to parents of kids who go to India, or you talk to Indians themselves who live in there. They've either lost touch with their traditions, their culture, etc., trading it in for Americanism, or they feel like, what have I done? Or they're completely over India. So what he did was he resurrected all these really ancient arts that were going to be sealed over. And it's interesting when you think about it. Things get sealed over historically that you don't even think about them anymore. The way people, like women wearing kimonos in Japan. Or you got to go to South. Who's from Germany here? You got to go to Germany to see how they wear the lederhosen. Or even languages get sealed, right? Right. Or even languages. After a while, people forget about languages or different arts and stuff like that, because
it's quite thing of the past that's just, it's interesting.
Oh yeah, interesting. They used to worship these stone gods. And it was about, and with so many people of India going west and looking for West as our new savior, he resurrected the ancient and taught the value in all of this stuff, the value in ritual. There is a value in ritual, the value in devotion, the value in the sacred literature, the value in the culture. And you see the West now at the same time, we've been absorbed in materialism. We have so much, we have too much stuff. We're sick of stuff. And then we started saying, okay, I'm laying in the gutter, but I'm looking up and I'm looking towards the light. And so at that time, when materialism was rampant in the 60s, come on, we're doing everything. We're doing every type of drug we could possibly imagine. And we're miserable. We're dying. We're burnt out. And we're saying, well, what does the East have to offer? And it brought us back to this almost like very traditional culture. And you see a lot of Westerners. Also with Russia, when the communism fell, the resurrection, they went to India and resurrected a lot of these ancient arts, the art of cooking, the art of, Vedic cooking is like so deep. The art of Indian dance, the arts of Ayurveda. Some of the best Ayurvedic doctors in the world are not from India any longer. Some of the best Indian dancers are not from India any longer. And it really made this culture what it is supposed to be. The culture is from India, and it's from this ancient times. But really, the ancient teachings are that God is one, and they were all spiritual souls. And we use these rituals and these arts and this culture to resurrect our own spiritual life.
Okay. Yeah. I'm with you. I agree.
Checking.
Yeah. All right. So this is the final sentences. That A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada passed away on November 14th, 1977, in the holy town of Vrindavan, surrounded by his loving disciples who carry on his mission today. All right. So why don't we read some of these appreciations? Let's start with Allen Ginsberg.
Okay.
All right. Who met Srila Prabhupada down there on 2nd Avenue, on the Lower East Side, and did programs with him in Ohio. They did a huge program at Ohio State University, and he also was there at the event that you described earlier.
What was Allen Ginsberg? He was just like a poet?
He was a poet, yeah.
He's a poet.
But he was more than a poet. He was like at that time, he was like an important cultural figure. He was, he was like a spokesperson for... he's a generation, let's say, before the hippies, but he, as a beatnik from the 50s, his poetry influenced the hippie idea. And so he was just like an important figure,
Mara, can you Wikipedia Beatnik, please? I'm just curious. Okay, is he still alive, Allen Ginsberg?
No, he passed away.
Okay.
He passed away.
All right. Do you want beatnik?
Yes, please.
Yes.
A young person in the 1950s and early 1960s belonging to a subculture associated with the Beat generation.
Okay, and Beat Generation.
And the Beat Generation. Are you going to play 20 questions with me, Mara?
A person who participated in a social movement of the 50s and 60s which stressed artistic self-expression and the rejection of the mores of conventional society broadly. A usually young and artistic person who rejects the mores of the conventional society.
Okay, that was good.
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. This is Allen Ginsberg in his appreciation of Srila Prabhupada. He said, Swami Bhaktivedanta came to the USA and went swiftly to the archetype spiritual neighborhood, New York's Lower East Side, and installed intact an ancient, perfectly preserved piece of street India. Very interesting way of saying it, huh? But that's really what it was, right? Louis knows the deal, right? He came down to like where we were. We were still a little too young then, but like to our world. And he brought something authentic, right? And installed it there. He adorned a storefront as his ashram and adored Krishna therein by patience, good humor, and singing and chanting, and expounding Sanskrit terminology. He, day by day, established Krishna consciousness in the psychedelic center of America East. He and his children sang the first summer through in Tompkins Square. To choose to attend the Lower East Side, what kindness and humility and intelligence. The main thing, above and beyond all our differences, because he was like a pretty wild character, right? And Srila Prabhupada, was like, yeah, I mean, it was very wild. And whereas Srila Prabhupada, was like, like a traditional holy man, So he says again, the main thing above and beyond all our differences was an aroma of sweetness that he had, a personal, selfless sweetness, like total devotion. And that was what always conquered me. Very nice, right?
That was very sweet.
Yeah. Now, but I like what he says there. In other words, you can read between the words here, and really what he's saying is most of the spiritual leaders that were coming from India weren't living like this. They weren't going down to the Bowery. They weren't going to the Lower East Side. They were kind of financed by wealthy people. And Srila Prabhupada was kind of like just saying, where, he was coming like risking everything, literally risking his life. And just, finding anywhere where people would accept that message. And he found it amongst these people downtown. Okay. So now George Harrison, who also, if Allen Ginsberg was an important figure at that time, the Beatles were like, beyond anything. But also, George also speaks of that kind of his sweetness in his personality and his humility. So this is George Harrison glorifying Srila Prabhupada. He says, the thing that always stays is his saying, I am the servant of the servant of the servant, right? This is what he taught, right? I like that. A lot of people say, I'm it. I'm the divine incarnation. I'm here, and let me help you. You know what I mean? But Prabhupada was never like that. I liked Prabhupada's humbleness. I always liked his humility and his simplicity. The servant of the servant of the servant is really what it is, He just made me feel so comfortable. I always felt very relaxed with him, and I felt more like a friend. I felt like he was a good friend. Even though he was at the time 79 years old, working practically all through the night, day after day with very little sleep, he still didn't come through to me as though he was a very highly educated intellectual being, because he had a sort of childlike simplicity, which is great, fantastic. Even though he was the greatest Sanskrit scholar and saint, I appreciated the fact that he never made me feel uncomfortable. In fact, he always went out of his way to make me feel comfortable. I always thought of him as a sort of lovely friend, really. And now, he's still a lovely friend. Srila Prabhupada has already had an amazing effect on the world. There's no way of measuring it. One day I just realized, God, this man is amazing. he would sit up all night translating Sanskrit into English, putting in glossaries to make sure everyone understands it, and yet he never came off as someone above you. That's
Can you
treacherous.
imagine typing a book? It's not even on a word processor.
Well, he wasn't typing. He was using the dictaphone.
Oh yeah, he has
Right.
his
You can
students.
Yeah, just like you can see behind me, I'm in a room dedicated to him, kind of like set up as like what would be his quarters here in Villa Vrindavan in Italy, and he would, he would go to sleep, maybe it depends where he was and so on, but he would go to sleep and wake up at even midnight, maybe sleep for 3 hours, 4 hours most, sometimes less. And then he would spend those hours when everybody was, because he's not only like teaching and managing like a global institution, with young people that aren't so experienced in like management, but and meeting so many people and teaching them, just like you're saying, he was teaching them the culture, he was teaching them how to cook, he was teaching them so many things, and constantly traveling. But he would wake up in those hours when no one else was awake, and he would translate these books, and that's really what we're living off today, was what he gave us through his books. Now, this one to me, I think, I'm going to read a paragraph from Thomas Merton, who was a very famous Catholic monk and theologian. He was also, an important activist as well. And I think what he says right here is like, it's so right on, like today more than ever. You ready?
Yeah.
He says, Swami Bhaktivedanta brings to the West a salutary reminder that our highly activistic and one-sided culture is faced with a crisis that may end in self-destruction because it lacks the inner depth of an authentic metaphysical consciousness. And now think about that in the terms of our in the terms of our activism, in the terms of our trying to right the wrongs of this world. It becomes one-sided, and it is in a crisis, I think, now more than ever. And he says it can self-destruct if it doesn't have an authentic metaphysical consciousness. True spiritual knowledge is where unity comes from. True spiritual knowledge is where peace comes from. True spiritual knowledge is the only true place where love expands and so on. And as he was a very special, soul, Thomas Merton. And I like the depth of his appreciation of Prabhupada. I'm going to read it again. He says, Swami Bhaktivedanta Swami brings to the West a solitary reminder that our highly activistic and one-sided culture is faced with a crisis that may end in self-destruction because it lacks the inner depth of an authentic metaphysical consciousness. Without such depth, our moral and political protestations are just so much verbiage, right? It's just more fighting if it's not based on truth. I really like that paragraph from him. All right.
I have a good story to tell you.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you think about meeting like a master, a swami, a master, an acharya, a person who's, his contribution is like, it's like world changing. It's epic. The type of humility he had to have, I found out one day. Because when I first stopped becoming a brahmachari, I decided they needed someone to live in 26 Second Avenue, which is the original Krishna temple that they had I think they just rented it out because that was the original Krishna temple. It was a storefront, and then they gave it up, of course, to move to a bigger temple. But many years later, they realized, man, we should have held on to that. That's going to be like a museum or something. So what they did was they rented it out again. It finally came back on the market for rent, and they needed someone to live in it. So I ended up moving into it, and I was training somebody to be a brahmachari, and I was living there, and I was giving classes 7 days a week. And I tell you, the damnedest people would come in that door. They'd be like, is this thing happening again? Is this like people who met the Swami 20 years before, and like then they never came back. And so they were just living in that neighborhood for 30 years or however longer. So every morning, our morning program consisted of waking up early, and there was no shower in there because Prabhupada had an apartment in the back. So we had no shower. So we would take a bucket shower. We'd get in one of those bus the bus boys carry these big trays. So we'd put that in the bathroom and take a bucket shower in a busboy tray like that. That's how we'd bathe. Okay. And then we'd go out and we'd walk in the dark to Tompkins Square Park, and we'd chant japa all the way there. And then we'd sit down, do some kirtan there, do our morning program there. And then we'd chant japa all the way back. And that's how we rolled. And we'd always had some interesting experience. And one day it was like super early in the morning. So it's always, the Lower East Side is a little creepy. It's got like a creepy element. It's still sort of got a creepy element, truthfully. But back then it was even more creepy. And on garbage day on the Lower East Side, there's always like massive amounts of like garbage stacked up, like hills and mountains of garbage. And so as we were chanting, and it's sort of like the sun's rising, it's still sort of got that, sketchy time of day, which if you were in the country, it'd be like the most beautiful time of day. But the garbage is moving. I was like, what the hell is that? The garbage is like moving. And I thought rats or something. And then started like shaking. And then all of a sudden a man jumps out of the garbage and just goes, hey! And I, in New York, I'm always ready for a fight personally. If you want to know the truth, I'm always ready. Like this is the day. Well, I'm always, we have that in New York. We grew up in New York. We're always thinking, someone's out to get us. That's how we look at the world. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to fight this guy. I'm wearing a dhoti. I'm gonna have to get in a fight in a dhoti. Came out of the garbage. He came out of the garbage. Here, it's on. And so anyway, he comes out and he said to me, and like he just sort of screamed something, and I was like, but when I got a chance to like sort of focus, he said, "Where's the Swami?" And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, where's the Swami? Where's the Swami? The Swami from 26 Second Avenue. And I said, this was like 1995, maybe. I said, the Swami is dead. And then the homeless guy who was living in the trash got very morose, and he said, you're kidding me. The Swami's dead? He said, I love that Swami. He said, I used to help that Swami every week. I used to carry huge pots for him from 26 Second Avenue to the park. And one day, I'm having a conversation with this guy in the morning. One day, he had me.
Were you still worried that it was going to break out into a fight, or you were like?
At that point, I let my guard down a little bit.
Okay.
And he said one day he had me carry this big thing of liquid with these balls in it. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh man, he got to carry the giant pot of glove jummins. That's like my favorite sweet in the world. And so he's like, yeah, I'm carrying this big pot over to the park. And you know what the Swami did? He took out one of those glove jummins and put it right in my mouth. Oh. And I was thinking, oh man, this guy was hand fed by Prabhupada. What like incredible mercy, like the saint who has changed the world, changed my, at very least, Prabhupada's changed my life, changed the trajectory of my whole existence. He put a sweet ball, a Mahaprasad, into the mouth of this, who knows who this guy was back then. Could have been crazy, drug addict, hippie guy. Sometimes those hippies go on to do great things with their life. Sometimes they go on and they're just living on the garbage pail. But it was an amazing amount of like, and Mother Yamuna, who was one of the first disciples, Henry, who's on Zoom right now, he had the good fortune of taking care of Mother Yamuna, lived at her house. He lived at his house. And that's where I met Mother Yamuna, because Shelter recorded a record there. And we did all our pre-production at his house. And we had the good fortune of Mother Yamuna, who was very intimately connected with Prabhupada. Prabhupada hand taught her how to cook. So we got to live with Yamuna for a month. And she was working on new recipes for her cookbook and feeding them to me and Paramananda and all the guys in the band. And then she would lead us through the morning program, and she would give us class every morning and lead kirtan with us every morning. And she would tell us incredible stories about Prabhupada and everything, and her travels with India with Prabhupada in 1972, when Prabhupada brought the first group of devotees to India when there was no ISKCON temple in Vrindavan, which was quite amazing, going to India with Prabhupada back then with all these white teenage devotees and what that was like. Parmananda, you probably have a good Mother Yamuna story. If you think of one, you can jump in here. Oh man, I lost my Mother Yamuna train of thought. But basically, she had a world famous cookbook of recipes that Prabhupada told her how to cook personally. And it became, and it's still available. It's called Lord Krishna's Cuisine. And it's one of the most popular cookbooks out there on Indian vegetarian cooking. And it has great little snippets in the book about her time with Prabhupada and traveling with Prabhupada all over the world. Another great book, which you can't find anymore, but one of the very first devotees to meet Prabhupada on the Lower East Side was this person named Howard Wheeler, who later became Hari Agriva. He was one of the first initiated devotees. And he was a beatnik. He was I think a professor at Ohio State, but they were all into that, psychedelic culture back then. And I had the good fortune of meeting him on his deathbed. It was quite amazing. But he wrote a great book. Everybody should read this book. Just Google search Vrindavan Days. Vrindavan Days. And Mara, maybe you can Google it right now and put the link up on the board for our Zoomers. It is such a great introduction to going to Vrindavan with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada explicitly told him, I don't want you to wear a dhoti, I want you to wear a suit. Because he was a professor and he wanted people to appreciate that this wasn't just a bunch of hippies. We have a college professor with us. And so Hari Agriva went and he tells his story, and his story going to India is so different than Raghunath Swami's story. Raghunath Swami's story is like, I'm here to surrender God and to find God and stuff like that, which is, and is very focused and very determined. And Hari Agriva's story is sort of like, I'm struggling like anything. I don't, I'm overwhelmed. You know what I mean? I have firm faith in my guru, but I don't know what's going on here. So it's such a great book. It's hard. It's practically impossible to find, but it's called Vrindavan Days. So I think Hari Agriva, what's that? Yeah.
And here it is. Nancy Arsh just shared it.
All right. Nancy Rothman shared that, huh?
Yeah, you Google the Hare Krishna movement.
that was an inside poke on Mara. But I want to say that, following in the footsteps of Madhu, and anyone heard my interview with Madhu the other day, where Madhu's turn in spiritual life was when his father bribed him with $100 to read the Bhagavad Gita. And after reading the Bhagavad Gita, he was like, yeah, all right. So I made a decision to bribe my son, Rocco. I said, I'll give you €100 if you read Hari Agriva's book, The Hare Krishna Explosion, which is an also very difficult book to get, but we found a copy at Tom's house, at Tarek's house. And so my son's reading that right now. But anyway, I just want to share the story because I went to New Vrindavan in 1990, maybe. And
which is I met Hari in West Virginia. That's dedicated to Krishna.
Yeah. And Hari Agriva, he got off his spiritual path. For a while, he contracted AIDS, and he was dying of AIDS. I'm pretty sure he was dying of AIDS. And I was with Satyaraj Prabhu, another Prabhupada disciple, and he called Satyaraj into his room. And if you've ever seen a person on their deathbed, he's rail thin. He couldn't go to the bathroom. He had a nurse cleaning up after him, and he was dressed in his final days. In retrospect, me as a 55-year-old man, he might have only been maybe 37 years old or something. He was a young man, 38 years old or something like that. I'm not sure.
Probably a little older. Yeah,
maybe a little older. Okay. But my point is, I'm here with like a very senior person who had so much intimate connection with Prabhupada, and he's sharing this stuff with Satyaraj, and I'm just listening. I'm like a fly on the wall. And he started saying two things I'll never forget. He said, Satyaraj, we met Prabhupada just on the streets. And we thought we were helping this old man out. Like, we are like these cool guys, and here's some old guy, and he's interested in spiritual things. We'll help him out. We'll introduce our friends to him. We'll help him find a place to rent. And he said, we thought we were helping him out. And when he said that, he just burst into tears.
Wow.
And then he sort of like positioned himself a little differently. And he said, Prabhupada told me just to trust Krishna and give my life to Krishna and surrender to Krishna, basically. And I refused. And now the material world is taking everything from me. And I'm fully surrendering. And it was such like this, like devastating, like mind-blowing statement for me, just like as a new devotee, just to listen to, like a man on his deathbed telling him how he refused to surrender, and now by the force of nature and by the holding on to some, almost like instruction of the guru, and now material nature is taking everything from me. Think about it. Like, I can't even imagine on your deathbed, however you postured yourself in your life as, I'm this cool guy, I'm this thoughtful guy, I'm this introspective guy, I'm this beautiful guy, whatever it is, none of it's true anymore. You're like rail thin. You can't even take care of your own body, and you're leaving your, and no one's around. All your loved ones are not there. No one's with you, and you're getting taken care of by a nurse. And he's taken sannyas, like he's got the robes of a monk now, like he's given up his material position as anything, and he's just like surrendering on his deathbed. It was quite
amazing. Yeah,
amazing and impressive, and etc. And it makes me appreciate the gift that was also given.
Well, we're kind of running down on time here, but that just reminds me that there's hundreds of thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world that have been touched and whose lives have been changed by Srila Prabhupada's sacrifice to come to the Western world, to go through those heart attacks, to live on the Bowery without any money, and endure all that he endured, and then to travel around the world 14 times more as an old man, writing all these books every night, getting this message out in so many ways. Everyone has a story about how Srila Prabhupada personally reached them, and each one's unique and each one is special. And it's only going to expand and expand and expand and expand as the years go on. To be able to, his teachings are so thorough that it's given it the power to kind of like to make it go into the future. There's so much there. He
set it up to snowball after he leaves.
Exactly.
He set it up to snowball.
And that's not an easy thing to do. Usually things just peter out after you go.
Sure. The guru leaves, and then a few disciples, and then it's gone.
Yeah. Right.
This will keep going. It's bigger than ever in India. It's unbelievable. And it's not like it's new. And some people ask that question, hey, is this a new teaching? Is this a new thing? No, this is something ancient that has just been brought to a Western world. People have been worshiping Krishna forever.
Yeah, but it still has the answers to our issues that we're dealing with today. And so I was just thinking for yourself and myself, it's like, the way that it's a special glory of Srila Prabhupada that here's this scholarly Bengali gentleman sadhu, who he knew Sanskrit and he knew all the subtleties of the philosophy, and he sat alone and went into meditation and shared these teachings, which, they're presented in different ways. You'll pick up a scholarly book on Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, and people can't make heads or tails out of it. But he presented it with such compassion and with such intelligence, to be able to communicate it to everyone, including like my friends and people that you learned it from about, who were like just straight out New York street kid thugs, uneducated, right?
Yes.
Like just, young kids who weren't even in school. Who were just mostly interested in violence and drugs,
Right. And then of course it's attractive. And then he attracted scientists. He somehow rode that slack line between like heaven and hell and presented it in such a way that so many people could opt into it.
But it never ceases to amaze me and draw out my gratitude when I think that how he could share these teachings so that my friends could understand it. And not only understand it, but then communicate it and that his Shakti, that Krishna's Shakti, Krishna's power worked through him, and that he could extend it even through people like this, to me is one of his great glories. And certainly I feel like the very fortunate recipient of that mercy in that way.
I don't want to end the show, but it's time to end the show. Mara, Any takeaways? Any appreciations you want to share, Mara?
Yeah, I have some takeaways.
Yeah.
You-
Appreciation. If you want, if
An
you share your own
appreciation?
personal Mara
You-
appreciation, if you have anything you want to share.
We're interested in you, Mara.
I wasn't prepared to share anything,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
but I mean, I have the utmost gratitude for Prabhupada. And I actually got into, when I started getting into Bhakti, I went into like a rabbit hole of reading all of the books by Prabhupada's early disciples, like Chasing Rhinos, Miracle on Second Avenue. There was another one I found at the Eco Village that I'm not even sure is still around. Like, I forget what it's called.
Mara
By Guru
has-
Das. Do you remember that
yeah.
book? You know, he
Yeah,
has a
I know
book
that
out
one.
too that
That's
I'd
a
never
great one,
seen
too.
before. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Mara's
so I
read
have-
them all.
Yeah, so I have a real like.
But
I
have
just
you
loved
read
reading about the
the
early ones.
Prabhupada Lilamrita, the 6-volume one that we gave?
I
you
haven't
as a
read all
gift?
6 volumes yet. I'm on volume 2.
Okay.
But thank you. All right, some takeaways. You can only know Bhakti by tasting Bhakti. The Guru gives access in. Within
Yeah.
the instruction of the Guru comes the ability to carry it out.
Harriet.
Kirtan is a superior high.
Get high.
Ooh, get high.
Peace, unity, and love come from true spiritual knowledge.
Peace, baby.
Yeah.
Only by mercy of the Guru can we see through the window of truth. Just,
Window of truth.
just because you sleep in the garbage doesn't mean the Swami won't hand feed you.
Sleep in
Yeah.
the garbage.
They sleep in the garbage. All right. That was beautiful.
We're going to go on Harinam today, right? On the streets of Florence, huh?
Florence Firenze. Oh, look at this crew. They're here. The stars are out. We have Hair Mustache, Wenke, Nicole. We've got all our Zoomers here today. Kylie, Mallory, Zed, Laura Pag. Oh, the Bologna posse is here. Akiko-san is here. Oh, we've got others. We've got Zoomers. Oh, look what happened. Look at that. He's the sweet thief. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I wish everybody could be here. Let's triple this retreat next year. We're definitely doing this next year. Mister, we're definitely doing this next year. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. And you know what? It's important on these holy days to have these remembrances, because it's by this smaranam, or this remembrance, they cultivate types of gratitude and a type of love. And it's important to have this for Guru and Param Guru and all the teachers in our life. And when we're in that mood of gratitude, we never become sad. We always feel like we have so much more we have to give back. And it's just a great way to be. Thanks, everybody. Back to your clapping and dancing. You think you're done? You're not done till it's done. We force them to dance in Italy.